Hey there. The most important part of life that most of us have no skills at. And that is dealing with our emotions. Hey buddy, what's up? Hey stinky dog, what are you doing? This is my friend's dog that has just come to interrupt my video. Right, Sitka? Where are you going? What's up, Sitka? Sitka, you can't interrupt my video. Come on, you need to sit down. So when we look at human emotions, and we look at children and adults, there is a common understanding that a lot of adults have an emotional age of somewhere between 10 and 14 years old, and that we don't necessarily graduate, improve on that level over time. And so how does that affect us? Well, it affects us in a number of ways. It doesn't help us in our regulation of our emotions. It doesn't help us communicate. And it doesn't help us resolve conflicts in our life. So if you've watched previous videos, you'll know that I went to a what's called conscious relationship training. Spent just around 2 months in that program. It was intense. I did have a heart attack during that. I lived, and now I'm here to tell you about it. I mean, my heart attack wasn't because of the course, completely. But there were, let's say, a lot of dysregulated emotional experiences that I just didn't know how to deal with properly. Like, I didn't know how to properly regulate them, regulate the experiences in my body, and I was taking on more things than if I had known prior how to do, then I would have. And actually, once I had the heart attack, and after I came back immediately, only missed like a couple days, and I realized that I was, how would you say, putting myself into the positions of other people that were going through emotional issues. And I was almost like transferring my emotional state to them, and really sort of like taking too much on. And once I got back and realized that I couldn't do that, that actually it might trigger another heart attack, then I was able to quite quickly adjust and get to a point where I could more easily regulate that phenomenon, those emotions. And it was much easier for me to still be empathetic, still be understanding, still be curious, but also be able to be aware that those are their emotions that they were going through, and that I didn't necessarily have to like take those on in order to be empathetic. And so I did, I learned an incredible amount about emotional regulation through this intense course. I also learned about how to communicate properly, and also how to be better at conflict resolution. And those who know me, I mean, I would say that emotional regulation, communication, probably of the three, my greatest strength would be, for the most part, conflict resolution. Mostly because I've been trained in debate in school, and I'm much more able to distance myself emotionally from especially political conversations. And with the tools that I also learned in this conscious relationship training, I was really able to improve on that. By far, I am not perfect. I definitely have the ability to trigger people with my style of speaking. And so learned quite a great deal about the style of speaking as well. And for some takeaways for those of you who are interested in being better at emotional regulation, being better at communication, and being better at conflict resolution, I would say the first, I'll say there's 3 key areas to help you improve your skills at dealing with your emotions, which will also then improve your relationships, and then ultimately your happiness in life as well. Because really, a lot of what life depends on is your ability to deal with your emotions as life happens to you. And that's what I've learned just by doing courses like this over the past 10 years. And that's why I do them. Me personally, I grew up in a family that had no emotional skills whatsoever. And so this is sort of why I gravitated towards this type of work to help me so that I could have a better, happier life. So, and I'm constantly making adjustments in all areas of my life so that I can increase my general well-being, my general happiness about life, my general fulfillment. And I've realized that the emotional component has a lot to do with that, especially because we live in a increasingly complex society where we are given an overwhelming amount of information. We are faced with much more complex issues because we're giving this information, and we're also in a position where there are increasing amounts of isolation, increasing amounts of loneliness, where people then are actually required to get a better handle on their emotions, on their ability to deal with others in life in order to maximize your fulfillment, your happiness, and your enjoyment in life. And I think that it's getting increasingly more difficult to get a grip on life, to find your own happiness, because our institutions, our governments, our communities have all disintegrated. And so we're left on our own to figure all this stuff out, where in the past we had communities, we had church, and they weren't all great, that's for sure. There's lots of bad things about them. But there was more of a sense of community if you go back in the past. There's more trust of institutions, there's more trust of government, there's more trust of your neighbors, you knew your neighbors. There's just more people around who can also help you with emotional regulation and are there to have your back and support you, and all these things that are super, super important for your emotional well-being that don't necessarily just rely on you. But we've come to a point where we are increasingly more isolated from others, and it's easier to be isolated from others, and it actually is becoming more difficult to have good relationships, to keep good relationships, to have community, to keep community. And unfortunately, you could say that it's the result of our, call it amoral capitalist society that we live in. And it's something that we really aren't aware of. And it's not to say that capitalism is bad. It's to say that there are some things that a capitalist society creates in our psychology that are really not good for us. And there are also things that capitalism creates that are very good for us, that allow us to have more freedom, that allow us to have a higher standard of living, but in the same result, it also has harms. And we're seeing those harms more and more in our society. And so my goal for myself is to avoid falling into those harms, avoid falling into those pits, and to get the best out of my life. And so there's sort of three main guidelines that I am working on, that I think are the big ones that seem like they're important for most of us. And the first one is to own your experience. And what I mean by that is to own your emotions and know that the triggering, the reactions, the feelings, the emotions that you have, regardless of the situation, not regardless completely. If someone points a gun at you, I mean, you're going to react to that in a very excited, very stressful way. Who wouldn't? However, if you're able to own your own experience of your emotions, then you're able to keep yourself calm in almost all situations, even potentially in a situation where someone pulls a gun on you. And I say that because if you blame others for your emotional reactions, then you're really not going to be able to look at why you might have these emotional reactions and have an understanding of them, and then really be able to deal with them, work with them, and resolve these emotional issues and understand where they come from, so that when situations occur, you're not as emotionally reactive. You can understand, oh, this is what's coming up. This is what I'm feeling right now. Do I have to feel this? Is this appropriate for this situation? Does it work for this situation? Yes, no, maybe, whatever. You have a sense of understanding of your emotions, and that's what you can do when you own them. And if you blame others for your emotions, then you can't do anything about them. And ultimately, they are your emotions. I'll use the metaphor as when someone says, oh, you're pushing my buttons. Well, realistically, that was the dog. Well, look at the metaphor of your buttons being pushed. People use that, you're pushing my buttons. And quite simply, if you didn't have the buttons, then they wouldn't be able to push them. So let's look at an example. I'll give you an example of what happened to me. If I wasn't reactive to critical feedback that I would consider as insulting, where people were calling me dumb, lazy, irresponsible, unintelligent. If I didn't have something inside of me that was like, ooh, am I a little bit like that? Then I wouldn't have that button where if someone called me that I would be like, I would be reactive and I would get angry at them. And that's what happened is someone did say those things to me. And I reacted to that and essentially just kind of insulted them back by dismissing everything they were saying and telling them that they were attacking me and that everything they were saying I'm going to dismiss because I didn't like the way that they said it. Now, if I had a deeper understanding of my own reaction to this sort of criticism, and I didn't have those feelings or that memory of being criticized like that from my family, then I might not have reacted that way. Or if I understood, oh, this is what my family life was like. I had this, I blocked it, I dismissed it, I left it. And then when someone brings it up, it now pisses me off because I haven't dealt with that. I haven't really, talked to myself, understood that, yeah, everyone can be dumb and lazy and unintelligent at some points in their lives, and that's okay. There's not an issue with that. It's not weakness. It's not something that I need to defend. And also, do I care what this person thinks? That's the other part of it. And so after it was pointed out to me that this is how I operate, I started to think about it and realize, yeah, it is true. And then I started to let it go. And then when I came back to that same conversation, and this person continued to interact with me in the same way, I could see that my blood was starting to boil. And I was like, oh, this is just him. I don't need to take this on. We've already been through this, and I can dismiss it as just that it was his style of communication and I didn't, appreciate it. And so I just kind of moved the conversation on without the, huge reaction. So I was able to own my own experience, understand it, and then not react in a situation where there were potential triggers. So that was a big one for me. The second one is acceptance. And actually you can hear a part of the second one in the first one, which is acceptance of yourself and acceptance of others as imperfect. Because realistically, most of us are not in control of our emotions and our feelings, and we don't understand when we think we are just communicating or telling people what we think, and they can take that as offensive, they can take it as harmful, they can take it as annoying or aggressive. But if we are able to accept that we don't know the truth, we don't know everything, and that the person that is potentially we're speaking to and that we could be reacting to, the same for them, then we just expect not less of them, but we can have some empathy for them and think, oh, they may not understand that what they're saying is irritating to me, or that really makes me angry, or that makes me sad, or that whatever. And that for the most part, their intention isn't actually even about me. They're just in their own emotional state and they're going through it. So they're probably not even thinking about me except to speak at me, speak at you, and sort of reveal, their ability to communicate, whether it's bad or good or not. And if you understand and accept that, you're imperfect, that we are imperfect, all of us, and that we don't have perfect communication skills, and you understand that others in the world don't as well, then you're going to be much more able to see the person and see what's potentially going on for them, and know that their intent is not to harm you, or not to aggravate you, or not to, they're really just potentially trying to communicate with you because they care about you, but they just don't have the skills that lock in and fit with what you're looking to receive perfectly. And so another fun fact that I'll throw in there is that I just read in a book about the inner child, is that most of us are walking around and our conscious awareness is about 12%. So we are consciously aware about 12% of our thinking, of our emotions, and of what's going on with us, which means that 88% of how we operate in the world is subconscious or unconscious. And if you think of that in an example, it's like, how often do you think about breathing? How often do you think about walking? How often do you think about the way that your arms are moving and how you're picking up a pen or a pencil and writing? How often do you think about when you're typing on a computer? You don't. You're just in your head and you're on a task, but there are things going on that are almost operating automatically or subconsciously. And it's the same thing with your thought process and your emotions. There are so many thoughts going through your mind every single minute of the day, and we pick and choose those thoughts, which ones we attach to, and we use those to, make decisions and go about our day. But there are thousands and thousands of thoughts, and that's why I call your brain basically a random thought generating machine. And we pick the thoughts out of that random thought generating machine that we use to guide us in life. And really, as a side, if you start to meditate and understand, and look at that random thought generating machine, you can see that it's always going in the background. It's always there. And then you can start to potentially let thoughts go if you choose not to pay attention to. And you get to also see how your emotions that you're unaware of will grab onto your own thoughts and connect to those, and those will color your perception of the world. And it's the same sort of thing with the world outside of you that's always operating, that's always going on. Your emotions will choose and attach to certain things and create a story on those certain things. And being aware of the story that you're creating based on all of these things that happen in the environment is one of the biggest things that you can do to see what your emotions are doing, what it's connecting to, and to kind of like see, is this an appropriate connection? Is this a good connection? Is this person who's doing this or that I'm judging, or are these reactions actually what are healthy for me? And you'll start to be able to see the reactions that are either unhealthy or just not accurate, or you can go, test them. Is this actually accurate? You can ask someone, did you mean this, and what's your intention? And this is what happened to me with a friend that I was talking to, who I looked at it as a person just basically barraging me aggressively with their advice, and then calling me dumb and resistant and all this thing to the advice. And what I realized afterward is that person actually cared a lot about me and was trying to help me, but the way that they were doing that, I was reacting to it. And so the communication wasn't getting through. And so I really had to look at that and be like, what's the intent? What are they trying to do here? And sort of piece out what the good stuff was. And then really be like, okay, why am I seeing this as something super negative and blocking the whole thing out? I'm not being receptive because of the style as opposed to the content and the intent. And that's not to say that the style was good or that the style was appropriate. It's just that the style of communication, I was reacting to it. And I learned that I didn't necessarily need to react to it. I could dismiss it without reacting to it because I didn't like that style. Or I could look past the style and be like, what's the content? What's the intent here? And then see if there's some good nuggets that I needed to hear. So it's being able to discern in a situation where I would typically just react. The third guideline that I want to use in my life going forward, and that I've learned, is to be curious and not right. And so most people are so intent on being right as the ultimate thing that they'll forego money, they'll forego health, they'll forego relationships just to be right. And yet, what is right for you is not right for others. And just like you or I have truths that we believe in, other people have truths that they believe in. And sometimes those conflict. And so what I'm trying to do now is to be curious instead of trying to be right, which means ask questions. Someone says something that you don't agree with. It's a matter of finding out more. Okay, why do you think this way? So you think this way. Is there a reason that you feel that this is correct? Or what is your, and you can say, if it's political or if it's whatever, you can say there, a lot of people will back it up with facts and things like that. But there's always opposing facts. If you really want to get to the core of an issue, then being curious about how people feel and where those feelings come from and where their, call it righteousness or rightness, comes from, is a much better approach than arguing with them about why they're wrong and you're right. So asking questions, being curious, and then not creating a situation where you're saying you're wrong because I'm right. Because who's right and who's wrong? You could say, you could take any topic, and if you look at it from a certain angle, you could find some rightness in it. You could find some wrongness in it. And so it's just a matter of which one you pick. And that's typically what we're doing, is we're just picking the select facts that we feel good about, that makes us feel good in our guts, and that are actually connect with our feelings and make us feel comfortable. We're connecting with those facts, and then we're going, this is why I'm right. And others are connecting with different facts because they have different feelings, and they're connecting those things, and they're like, this is why I'm right. And when you have two of those and lock horns, you're not going to get anywhere. So understanding where they're coming from and what makes them feel like, they're operating in the right is just an easier thing to do, because they're not going to believe you. They're not going to be convinced if you're telling them they're wrong and you're right. And if you understand them more and show them, they called it the long arm instead of the short arm, show them the long arm, that you're willing to listen, you're willing to hear their side and investigate what they're feeling, then you're probably going to be able to find a connection there and a situation where you both agree, or where there's a compromise. And that's what, going forward, I'm going to be looking for, is a connection, a compromise, is somewhere in there where we can agree. And the easiest way to do that is to answer questions, is to ask questions. And so I hope that helps you. This program was a tremendous help for me, and I'm going to keep digging into that. And if you have any questions, hit me in the comments. I would love to answer them. Have a good one.